Another problem that we have with air pollution is smog. And this problem is kind of more relevant than acid rain, mainly because we've addressed acid rain a lot and we've really cut down on the pH levels of our rain, particularly in the New England area. But smog is a pretty big issue. It still affects many regions here in the United States and even more so abroad, particularly in the rapid industrialization of China. If you look at this picture here, this is Hong Kong, China. Here's the Hong Kong skyline behind these people, and they have a whole tourist wall of beautiful shots of Hong Kong when there's no smog on days. The fact that the tourism industry in Hong Kong has to even put this up should tell you the issue that smog has in this city and many cities around the world. So the two main causes of smog is, yes, air pollution, but particularly it's two different things. First, it's ground level ozone. Ground level ozone, or ozone in general, is O3. O2 is regular oxygen. This is the oxygen that we're breathing, but add another oxygen and that gets you ground level ozone. The other thing that is creating this smog is particulate matter. Particulate matter is literally stuff in the air, and we'll talk about that more on the next slide. Now this is stuff, ground level ozone and particulate matter isn't really released directly. It's not a factory releasing it, it's not a car releasing it. Instead, it's actually the result of chemical reactions due to other air pollutants. So for example, sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide, these were two pollutants that did come from factories, that did come from power plants, that came from our vehicles. They caused acid rain, but the reactions of these two chemicals together, reactions with them and oxygen, and really reactions with sunlight. The reactions of all of this stuff coming together is what creates ozone and this particulate matter. So ground level ozone, the reason it's emphasized as ground level is because we do have good ozone. Good ozone is found in the stratosphere, so in this area, and it's actually very, very important when it comes to protecting us as humans from ultraviolet radiation. And we'll talk about that more in our next lecture. But ground level ozone is the ozone literally around you and me. We could walk through this ground level ozone. This ozone is not good for our health, and I'll talk about that more shortly. So again, ozone found two layers or two different places on Earth. When it's at our level, that's when it becomes dangerous for us. Particulate matter is stuff in the air. This could be things like dust, like ash, just small particles of something. Sometimes you see it and sometimes you can't. Some particulate matter, so we have like dust, pollen, and mold. To get an idea of how big this is a human hair. And these blue circles are representing some of the bigger particulate matter. Then there's small particulate matter. This is typically the things that oxygen and sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide, that's all those chemical reactions making these really, really, really small particulate matter. These are these little red balls in here. So you can see tons of these little red balls fitting in just a human hair. So very, very small particles. So although you might not see them in the air, you're breathing them in. And as you can imagine, that can cause some pretty dangerous health effects. So not only does smog look bad, no one goes to the city thinking, yay, we get to have smog today. This isn't something people want around. But not only does it have, visual problems, but there's actually some really serious health repercussions. So if we look at that particulate matter, that really, really small particulate matter gets in our lungs. So we breathe that in, and we don't really have natural systems to get rid of that really, really small stuff. Bigger things like dust and pollen, our airways, and even things in our lungs will help clear that stuff. But the really, really small stuff will actually get lodged in our lung tissue. This leads to higher incidences of lung cancers and lung diseases. That ground level ozone is an irritant. And it's not just an irritant for people who have asthma, but really for everyone. This can cause a lot of coughing, this can cause dry throat. And for both of these, whether it's particulate matter or ground level ozone, with a lot of different pollution, it's like, oh, if you're young or if you're elderly or if you're already sick, this is bad. This stuff is bad for everyone. Yes, it might bother them a little bit more, but for everyone, there are a lot of links to smog and respiratory diseases and dying from those respiratory diseases. This is such a serious issue that our lawmakers around the world have created a index called the AQI. So AQI. This is the Air Quality Index. And essentially it's a measure of smog. It's looking at ground level ozone and particulate matters. So definitely take some time to explore this link. We'll look at this link a little bit now. This AQI is a map of China, but you can actually look at it around the world. So what we're looking for is lower numbers. We want AQI to be low, meaning lower means safer. So let's zoom in to, let's do the here you can see everything. So these green numbers are representing like normal. This is good amounts of smog. There might be a little bit, but nothing that would bother you. In yellow, this is going to be a little bit higher risk. Yellow is, you should be wary. If you're sensitive, if you have asthma, you should probably not be outdoors. Red, this is starting to affect everyone. And then you have these purples and these really dark reds. I mean, here we are in part of India, 300. This is, you can barely see in front of you. You're going to need to wear an air mask. Actually, you shouldn't even go outside. As you can see here in the United States, we've gotten pretty good at controlling our smog levels, but it's still an issue for some areas in the United States, particularly along coastal California. In the part of China I used to live in, we had really bad smog days. So bad that we would actually cancel recess for children because we weren't allowed to take them outside. So although a much bigger issue in China, they're still addressing it. They're still trying to overcome these issues. But as I said before, take a chance to take a look at this. You can find just United States AQIs for your region. There's apps on iPhone and Android where you can follow the air quality index day to day to see how safe your air is. Now, as I mentioned, in the United States, we have gotten so much better when it comes to our air quality. This is including the acid rain program that we talked about before, and also with dealing with our smog issues. And the major reason for that is because of the Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act has a ton of different programs, but its major thing is it sets standards for 6 air pollutants. We've talked about 4 of those pollutants. We've talked about ground level ozone and particulate matter. Those are the issues with smog. Here at the bottom, sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide and other oxides. We found that with acid rain. And then the middle 2, we're not going to talk much about, really at all. Carbon monoxide and lead, because we've pretty much gotten rid of them. We don't have problems with them anymore, and it's nothing you really need to worry about. But you should definitely know that the Clean Air Act covers all 6 of these. Pay particularly close attention to the first 2 and the last 2. Very similar to the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act sets up standards, but it's up to the states to enforce them. So the EPA says, okay, there can be this much ground level ozone in your area, or this much sulfur dioxide in your area. You, Maryland, you have to enforce companies and cars and etc. to make sure that you meet those standards. But the EPA does help, particularly when it comes to vehicles. You know, it's hard for a state to say, okay, all cars sold in our state will have this standard, but in Virginia they have this standard, in Pennsylvania they have this standard. Instead, the EPA kind of handles the vehicles part. They're the ones setting different emissions goals for vehicles. And we saw that when talking about climate change, that the EPA is setting up laws to control the amount of greenhouse gases. There's other gases that they're regulating as well. But otherwise, states have to regulate companies and power plants that are releasing these toxins into the atmosphere. And it's been effective. Not only did we see that acid rain is declining, but all 6 of those pollutants are declining. This is incredibly impressive. So since the 1970s that we see over here, our gross domestic product, so the amount of money we're making, has increased. The number of miles, so the amount of transportation, has increased. The number of people and people needing energy, as well as energy, has increased. Our carbon dioxide emissions have increased, but despite all these increases that you would suspect would lead to an increase in air pollution, we've actually declined in air pollution. We've lowered lead, we've lowered sulfur dioxide, we've lowered particulate matter. So it's working despite us growing, despite us thinking, yes, it's going to get worse. It's actually getting better. So these programs are effective. Our government is actually doing stuff. So again, in summary, smog is caused by 2 major pollutants, particulate matter and our ground level ozone. There's not a single industry or source of those. It's really just reactions with sunlight and other chemicals in our air. But the Clean Air Act is really helping in reducing those pollutant loads, not just of these gases, but of many other gases. And it's good too, because smog has a ton of health effects, not just for those that are impaired and those that are old and young, but really for all of us. So really, really awesome that we have been able to kind of turn this issue around.